Elantra N, what is this car all about, especially in regards to track driving? So I want to put together a little bit of a video. And so why am I putting together a video? Who am I? What is this all about? When it came time to shop for a track car, that's something that I could play around with, but also something that my son could develop as a driver with, something that would be able to run a pretty good pace on track, be reliable, work on his skills, not be crazy on consumables. Honestly, the choice is not great, especially in the price range, right? The budget that we're looking for. Yeah, you've got the BRZs. We started off with the GTI, but as my son's skills developed, we found kind of the limits of the car that he was at was with the GTI. And the next steps were to either spend a lot of money on the car or find something else that was just a little bit of a stronger platform. And we decided to go this way with the Elantra because I heard a lot of good things about it. I have some contacts in my world we'll chat about in a second that we got some insight with it. And we thought, okay, as a platform, this is great. It's much more of a better daily driver than, say, a BRZ or something along those lines. And we still wanted to keep some warranty aspect with it. So yeah, enter the Elantra N. But when we look for information on that car on the track side, there was some information out there, but not a lot. Mainly the information that's out there is like, oh, I got a tune for the thing. Check out my tune. But as far as like in-depth track review, there just wasn't a lot out there. So, all right, let's back up a little bit. My background is in motorsports. I coach in motorsports, mainly on the motorcycle side, but car side, I've been doing it over for 20 years. It's how I make my living. And in this arena, I've been I've been a tester for magazines on the motorcycle side. Done it for over 10 years for multiple magazines, so I understand the process of testing and what's involved with that. On the car side, I got into the car coaching just over probably 10 years ago. Cars have always been my first love. I've been involved with cars all my life. Actually, I started racing motorcycles because I couldn't afford to race cars. So that's why I got into the motorcycle side. But yeah, this is what I do. That's pretty much the only thing I do well. So yeah, let's just kind of dive into a little bit of what's going on with the Elantra N and my track review for it and next steps, and see if that helps you out as well. Yeah, so the car's a 2023 Elantra N. We bought it new, and first thing we did before we took it to the track is we did do tires and wheels with it, and it's the DCT model as well. We had actually started off with a GTI manual and realized there was a bunch of shortcomings with that. So we decided to go with the DCT version of the N. And yeah, first time we took it to the track, we did do tires and wheels because we didn't want to burn up the stock tires. So we wanted to use those for the rain. Cars mainly located in the Pacific Northwest. And so, yeah, we wanted to make sure that as driving skills advanced, if we were doing some wet weather driving, we'd have some tires available for that. So yeah, we just started off with tires and wheels. We didn't have a lot of choices on there's a lot of choices on wheels, but we wanted something that was just going to start us off in the beginning. So we just went with some 18, 8.5, 45 offsets, 245, 40 18s. And the first set we used was some AR1s, took it to the track, bone stock, didn't even have an alignment with it. And you ran it around and actually had a really good time with the thing and saw that over lightly modded GTI that, yeah, we were actually pretty close with the thing. So that was pretty cool. And as far as the amount of track days are on this, I'd have to go back and count. I think probably at this point I'm going to guess and say about 12 days, maybe a little bit more than that, maybe 14 days on the car between the Ridge and the Pacific Northwest, and Thunder Hill West. So mods on the car at this point are we've done a lot of the engine mounts, transmission mounts, intercooler. We did do the intercooler. We're still on stock tune. We wanted to leave that alone for now because the car right now, honestly, is not bad on power for what we're trying to accomplish with it, which is ultimately, working on driver skills. We did do quite a bit of work to the brakes, though, because obviously brakes are very, very important in this world, and we want to make sure that we could have something that was consistent and also not kill us on consumables. So yeah, we've got brake hoses front and rear. We've got gyro disc rotors front and rear. Fluid, of course, the RS3 Audi ducts, and removed on the calipers, removed the end thing to get a little bit more cooling in there. And brake pads, we started off with the Frodo 312s, ran those quite a while, and they were good. They were excellent. I'm a big Frodo fan. I use them on my Camaro. I've got a ZL1 1LD Camaro. I've used them on those as well as other client cars. I'm a big fan of them, except for the cost. That part of it's rough. So those lasted and stopped well for probably 6 or 7 days. And I've become a recent convert on the Cobalt pads. So now we're running the Cobalt pads. We just did some days with those, and I got to tell you, I'm super impressed with them. First of all, the cost is literally half of the Ferodos. And actually, I feel like there's a little bit better pedal feel, especially like the first like 20 to 60% of brake pressure. Just have a lot more feel. Just, yeah, I'm a big fan of them. We're running the XR1s in the front. We do have the Frodo 2500s in the rear, though I think I am going to end up going back to stock. We'll talk about that in a little bit. The car has got the Mock Racing Swift springs, and we've been on pretty mild alignment. 2.5 in the front, 2 in the rear. We're doing zero toe right now, just to baseline everything. And I mentioned before, tires and wheels. The second set of tires that we ended up running on this were the CRSs, and they're the version 2 CRSs. And we'll get into those we'll get into those in a little bit when we start talking about each characteristic of the car, how I want to be able to break it down. So I really never got to drive the car until Thunder Hill West. I got to spend some sessions in it at Thunder Hill West. Off season, bring the car down there again, trying to advance some driving skills. And I got to spend basically half a day in the car, open passing group at Thunder Hill West. So it was very, very aggressive group. So yeah, I think we'll break this down in just what some of my first impressions were, and yeah, we'll kind of take you through some of these different categories. Yeah, so driving impressions. The tires had a couple of days on them already when we went out. It was a cool morning at Thunder Hill West, and we went out. And my first impressions of the car is you're very much sitting over the front wheels, right? You get in the car, kind of sitting over the front wheels, and you have that impression that your feet feel like they're literally on the front wheels or over it. So you have a very forward feeling with the car. And the car also feels a little bit long. Not a bad thing at all. It's a little bit different in that regard. Second impression was that the car's stiff. Even though we're running the stock dampers, we've got again the Mock Racing Swift springs. The car's stiff, and initially with some of the bumps, the car was before the tires warmed up. We would definitely skate across them a little bit. As tires warmed up, it wasn't too bad. But first impression is, yeah, the car's stiff. I mean, honestly, it feels as stiff as way stiffer than my SS Camaro 1LE with the stock suspension, but not that far off my ZL1 1LE with MCS coilovers on it. So the car's stiff. Yeah, the third is as tires warm up, there's a massive amount of confidence in the front end. I mean, the feedback from the front is just absolutely exceptional. Turn-in is very, very good. You can definitely feel everything that you want with the front tires. You can, how they want to, you can, as they start to roll over, just very, very happy with that. Just incredible feedback from the front. I'm driving off of corners, the way it tracks, yeah, it tracks like a rear-wheel drive car. Unless you do get the thing spinning. As you get the front tires to spin a little bit, obviously you're going to lose some trajectory with it. But if you keep it in that range, really good. A car does not like to be, front-wheel drive car, of course, does not like to be rushed. Definitely have to work on getting it pointed, and how you feed throttle is also very, very important. But yeah, the front end feedback is just absolutely exceptional. And it actually it gives you a little bit of a little bit of false confidence. You want to get the thing in there and just stick it in there, but you got to be careful of, obviously front wheel drive and making sure it doesn't push. You can get it to push if you want, which is great, right? So you can manipulate how you get it in there, how it pushes, how you can bring it back. And that's a big point right there. I've driven a lot of other front wheel drive cars that once the front pushes, you have to wait forever for the thing to come back. And it just takes forever. This one, again, in some of the longer radius corners where you get the front to break away, you can ease off and the front comes back very, very quickly, just regains composure, and then you can, of course, work on the drive. So yeah, the front wheels, absolutely fantastic. That part of it's great. Brakes, right? So we're still using obviously stock calipers. The setup that we have with the Cobalt pads, the gyro rotors, honestly, stopping power right now is fantastic. I haven't driven the car in some of the harder stopping areas, but the actual stopping power is fine. We'll see what happens when obviously temperatures get up and maybe it's a track that has some longer, harder brake zones, but the brakes are hanging in there honestly really well. I think we will have some issues potentially with just keeping caliper maintenance up, but we'll definitely see how that goes. So yeah, power's great. Or sorry, braking power is great. The feel is fantastic. Again, I think that there's something there with the gyro rotors. My impression is that there's just more feel as you're applying the brakes, and also even on brake release. Again, the whole front end feel with the car is wonderful. Power, yeah, power is pretty good off a corner, quite honestly. And I'm going to show you some data graphs here in a minute that are kind of cool. Yeah, power's great. Shift's great. Downshift's great. No factor there. It's at a point now where I would like more power, but that's not necessarily going to be the next priority. Though when you see the data graphs, it is very, very telling. So the big issue that we're having with the car, in a negative way, is oversteer. It does definitely have some lift oversteer, and it's not pretty, especially when the rear tires are cold. Yes, I understand front wheel drive. I get it. Got to build some heat in them. But even then, in driving at pace, and I was able to get to a pretty decent pace at Thunderhill West with it. And when you do that, when you drive at pace, how you're timing your entry, I mean, I feel like I'm being held back on what I want the car to do, because the rear will start to come around and it's a little bit inconsistent. So yes, I need to work on some things in my driving with the car if I get more time with it. But yeah, the bottom line is a lot of your brain space is spent on when is the rear going to come around? It's going to come around early. It's going to come around late. How's that going to happen? So that is a little bit of an issue. When the tires are cold, it's honestly a really big issue. You just have to be really, really diligent with that. And again, the CRS tires, honestly, not a crazy big fan of them on this particular application. I think they take a little bit too long to warm up. And honestly, the wear for the price is not great. And I realized, we were driving the car at pace, but the wear was not fantastic. Of course, we're rotating them around and doing all those things. I think next tires will probably go to either back to the AR1s, or I'm a big fan of the Kumo 730. So I think that's something we'll try. And we'll talk about next steps with what I want to look at with the rear in a minute. So I'm going to share some stuff here, and this will hopefully put a few things into context. I'm a big data person. Part of what I do in, again, my motorsports coaching world is data. So I spend a lot of time with data, looking at a bunch of things, and so data is definitely in my world. Okay, so what's interesting about this car when we look at it, and of course we're always thinking, okay, we got to go through the corners faster, got to go through the corners faster. Well, what's interesting, actually, I'm going to make this one full screen, so bear with me. Yeah, I'm going to make these full screen so you can see them a little bit better. So these are just speed data graphs. They're really simple, but speed is really where I start with a lot of this, because I mean, that's honestly what matters, right? Is speed around the racetrack. So in this case, this is at the Ridge, and we are comparing a M3 competition that's got work versus the Elantra N with my son driving. And when we look at this, yes, of course, we see this M3 has obviously got a ton of speed, right? It's a super fast car. But what I look at more importantly is, what's happening in the corners, right? What's happening in and out of the corners. And the lap time for this M3, I was driving it. It was a very good lap time, sub 50 lap at the Ridge, which honestly, anything under 2 minutes at the Ridge is quick. Anything under 50 at the Ridge is very, very quick. And when you look at what the Elantra N, right, Elantra N's black, when you look at what it's doing versus a very well prepped M3, suspension, sway bars, control arms, blah, 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 everything on it, it's pretty impressive. So when you look at, the speeds to the actual corners, it's really not that far off. It's pretty darn good. Of course, when you add up the lap time, and this is a very quick lap for the Elantra N at the Ridge, yeah, as far as front wheel drive cars go, especially in the state that this car is at. So we'll talk about the goals of where we want the car to be in a little bit. But yeah, this is honestly, this is super impressive. If you're to look at this graph, you go, okay, cool. I want to go quicker. Well, in my world, if I looked at this, I'd say, well, yeah, we can always try to work on cornering and mess around with that. But yeah, there's 4 seconds in just the power. So way that I would look at this, if I were looking to gain lap time, right, or reduce lap time, the first thing I'd look at is power. Obviously driver comfort, which we'll get into the end goals with this. But yeah, I mean, this is honestly very, very impressive. So now let's take a couple of other ones and look at these as well, because it's not looking. I don't want to look at just one example. While we're talking about the Ridge, let me go back and look at. Hang on a second. I want to go back and look at. Bear with me for a second. There we go. Yeah. So this is another speed graph from the Ridge, and this just happens to be off of my SS1LE when it was in fairly stock form. It did have a square setup on it, but it was stock suspension. It was amazing car. And later on, we ended up going very, very quick in this car, but this is still a very, very quick lap time in this car. But this one had square setup on the Camaro. But again, you can see that the Elantra N is really not that far behind. I mean, again, if you look at actual, the cornering, corner speeds, how it's getting in and out of the corner, you can see that the car pulls off the corner incredibly well. I mean, it's extremely good. And again, when you look at the braking, especially some of the high-speed braking here, we're braking from over 130 miles an hour. Got a couple other spots where you're braking from almost 110, 120 miles an hour. You can see the brake trace is just absolutely fantastic. So the way it's decelling. So yeah, again, this is another one where we look at it and go, the thing's not bad. I mean, it obviously handles incredibly well. So let's take an extreme example. And this extreme example is at Thunder Hill West. And this is somebody when the day that we were at, this is off a very, very well-prepared Aero C6 Corvette GS. It actually podiumed at that time attack event that day. And, so you're like, yes, it's a crazy extreme example, but I think that's kind of fun. So when you look at it, obviously we're blue, the Corvette is red. When you look at it again, it's not that far off, right? And we're talking some, corners that have a little bit of speed into them. Here, I mean, as far as some of the, cornering speed, again, this is a fairly aeroed Corvette as well. Very, very good lap time in the teens at Thunder Hill West. Yeah, we lack a little bit in one, but when we talk about goals, we'll talk about that in just a minute. And of course, the Corvette's obviously got some crazy acceleration. So yeah, this is another one where it's like, wow, in the middle of the corner, coming in and coming out initially, it's not that bad. I mean, off these slow corners, it's shocking how well the car does. Yeah, pretty nuts. So, all right, well, let's kind of wrap a little bit of this up. So the next steps for this particular car would be getting comfort with the oversteer. And this is something that I'd like to mess around with. I'd like to actually go to I know all the autocross guys are like, oh my God, you're insane. Yeah, I want a smaller rear bar. I'd like to maybe try some adjustable links to mess around with some preloads with the bars. But yeah, just getting the thing, I would gladly trade off some of the entry oversteer to be able to modulate maybe some potential front end push. Again, and the reason being is that the car responds well to that. So yeah, part of it could be how the rear is set up, but I would like to try actually a smaller bar. I think the N line is a 17 millimeter bar versus the 24 that's on this one. That's something we're playing around with a little bit. Or maybe it's just some adjustable end links where we can play around with some preloads in the rear, at least to start with. Also, I think we're going to try just a different set of tires for the rear of the car, something that comes up to temperature a lot quicker, maybe some AO52s or something along those lines. That way we can not have to worry about that, and we can just deal with playing around with rotating the front and playing around with that. Yeah, so that'll be sort of the main thing that we'll look at, is getting just a little bit more comfort out of the car on the oversteer part. And then once we're comfortable with that, then yeah, we'll probably start to look at power as far as lap time, because trying to go through the corners more, obviously that's where the risk is, and we can see we're not that far off. The other thing that we might want to look at for this particular car is a rear wing to get the rear pushed down a little bit more. So yeah, rear sway bar, wing are kind of the direction we want to go. And then after that, we would look at we would probably look at power just to see what that does. So yeah, overall, I mean, honestly, this is an impressive car for the price. I mean, we start running some of these lap times. We start getting into the mid. I think this car is even as it stands now with probably a little bit of a different tire. I think this car is probably capable of a 24, 23, maybe at Thunderhill West, which is very quick. At the Ridge, anything under 55 again, is starting to haul ass. And for the price point of this car and what it offers, it's unfreaking believable. It really is. So yeah, we're going to keep playing around with it and make it a good driver education tool as well as just a fun track toy. So there you go, Elantra N.